Okay, so this is mate choice, and if you went to the lecture last year, the psychobiology lecture, you probably might be familiar with some of this stuff, but I think it works and certainly helps to go through some of it to begin with, so that at least you have a basic understanding of it, and we'll talk more about this in the lecture. So by way of an overview, I'm going to talk about different kinds of mating systems that occur across the animal kingdom. Ask the questions why humans and many other animals discriminate in their choice of sexual partner. Why are we fussy about who we have sex with? Looking first at the similarities between sexes, the kinds of things that males like in males and males like in females and females like in males, but focusing on what is similar, and then looking at the differences between these different preferences. And then finally we're looking at the kind of things which might affect different kinds of aspects of mate choice, such as the kind of mating system you have, whether you're polygamous or monogamous, whether you're in it for the short term or the long term. So let's have a look at different kinds of mating systems. There are a whole bunch of these, and there are very many subtle differences in between these. So we see the first one is polygyny. This is very common across mammals. This is probably the dominant one of the dominant strategies in mammals, where one male has access to many females. Examples of these would be gorillas, deer, elephant seals, and so on. The next one would be polyandry. This is really fairly rare. This is where one female has access to many males. And certain reptiles engage in this. So this is kind of the offspring of polygyny. Promiscuity, for want of a better word. This is where males and females mate opportunistically with whoever. So the males will mate with the females. There's no kind of sense in which there's a long-term attachment there. Sex happens, the male kind of leaves, and the female is left to bring the children. Now that might sound pretty harsh if we're talking about humans, but that is absolutely the natural way for many different organisms to do things, and it just seems to be the case that females themselves are capable of rearing the offspring with no additional help from the males. So it's not the males being mean and nasty or anything like that, it's that the females basically don't need the males and are quite capable of bringing the kids up on their own. We see bonobos, many of the primates, chimpanzees do that. And then finally is pair bonding. Pair bonding is where the males and females mate together, usually following a protracted courtship. So courtship is important. The males hang around following the birth of the offspring and will help provision the offspring either by foraging for food or indeed looking after the babies in other ways, for example incubating them. Possibly humans do this, but this is mainly a bird strategy, an avian strategy, avian just being the kind of Latin name for birds. It's an avian strategy. About 90% of all bird species pair bond. So mammals are predominantly kind of promiscuous. There's very little parental investment on the part of on the part of the father in the offspring for most mammal species, whereas birds it's reversed. Now I've got humans down at the bottom here, but actually, as a matter of fact, if you look at across human societies, all of these different strategies have been used and still are used. For example, very rich people, kings and so on, big leaders, will often have had in the past anyway a harem, a number of official sexual partners with whom they have many children. Polyandry occurs has occurred in certain societies, although as in the animal kingdom it's quite rare. Promiscuity, obviously this happens, and but probably most common form of mating strategy in which children are born is the pair bonding for humans. These different mating strategies have particular correlates. When we have polygynous and polyandrous strategies, so this is when you have one male and multiple females, there tends to be a fairly substantial difference in sexual dimorphism. And sexual dimorphism usually just means the extent to which males and females of a particular species resemble each other. So if you think of something like dogs, for example, dogs are pretty low on the sexual dimorphism scale. It's not absolutely obvious by just a cursory glance whether a dog happens to be a male or whether a dog happens to be female. And similarly with domestic cats, it's a kind of similar thing. And some birds are so similar that it requires absolute experts in order to tell which is which. Other hand, birds such as peacocks, the male is obviously different from the female. Mallards, the male is obviously different from the females, and so on. So high sexual dimorphism tends to correlate with low levels of pair bonding. The more similar to the males and females of a particular species are, usually the more male parental investment there is in the offspring. It's not just about size, it could be about coloration, it could be about adornments such as horns or things like that, which leads to males and females being different. But also size is a big issue. And testicle size is another thing which correlates with the kind of mating strategies. Animals that are more likely to have access to females. So in the case of polygynous animals, where one male has access to a number of females, and there's usually won that ride through conflict when you have the alpha male and a bunch of females, then usually the testicle size of these animals is actually relatively small. It is when there is a kind of promiscuous mating strategy where males and females mate opportunistically. This tends to drive testicle size up. Why does it do that? It's because these organisms and animals such as chimpanzees engage in a thing called sperm competition. Sperm competition is where the sperm themselves are used to displace other sperm in there. So if one chimpanzee has sex with a female, then the next male that has sex with them, well, that female has got the sperm from the first male already in her insides, and the second male comes along and produces a large variety of sperm in order to dislodge that sperm and replace it with its own. So this tends to lead to large testes in order to produce a larger amounts of sperm. And if you look at this little diagram on the right hand side here, various different kinds of species here, all primates, we can see that quite a bit of information in here, which is that if you look at the right here, we've got the gorilla. So the relative size here shows that male gorillas are generally substantially bigger than female gorillas. Male gorillas, as I mentioned, also have comparatively small testicles compared to humans, chimpanzees and bonobos, and actually surprisingly relatively small penises. Also on these pictures here represents the kind of common way in which the two members of the species would have sex. So this can be seen that this is from a kind of rearwards position. Chimps likewise from a rearwards position here, but note the larger testicles of the chimpanzee compared to the gorilla. And also this picture here shows that females have a kind of a swelling around their backside, which is sexually attractive to the males. When we get to bonobos, similar kind of testicle size to chimpanzees, these are extremely promiscuous, and surprisingly the preferred mating position is actually face to face, as is traditionally the case with humans. Again, bonobos have a swelling here on the rear end, and then we turn to humans here. We can see some relatively smaller testicles compared to chimpanzees and gorillas, which is because humans involve in less sperm competition, presumably because they can be more certain that the female has not had sex with somebody else, whereas the chimpanzees can't be certain of that, but not as small as the testicles of the gorilla, which suggests that possibly females are more promiscuous, female humans are more promiscuous than female gorillas. A final thing here, yes, face-to-face again is the preferred mating style, and the bodies of males and females are kind of actually designed to do this because this is the most comfortable way of doing it. And females, unlike, rather than having a swelling here, which is attractive to the males, have a swelling here. What could that be? So there are a number of physiological correlates of mating strategies, and if we compare ourselves to other species, other primate species, we can kind of suggest that we are maybe more promiscuous than gorillas, because of the comparatively large testicle size in humans, but not as promiscuous as bonobos and chimpanzees there, although obviously there is other evidence for this too. So why do humans and why do other animals discriminate in their choice of sexual partner? Why don't we just mate with everyone we meet? What's the fuss? Why are we so fussy about this? Well, actually, one way of thinking about this is to think about the fact that, going back to previous lectures where I described sex as basically a kind of process of genetic shuffling, where the father essentially takes his pack of genetic cards, shuffles them up, cuts them in half, the mother does the same, and then puts those halves into their germ cells, sperm cells, egg cells, and then they get recombined. So each child will have a unique pack of cards, a unique deck of cards, which is some combination of the mother's cards and the father's cards. Imagine that let's just imagine there was a situation in which we didn't care. Let's also imagine, and it's true, that people vary in the quality of the genes that they have, and that might sound a little bit fascist and unpleasant, but it's actually true. Some people's genes make them very resilient to disease, it makes them kind of physically stronger, and so on, whereas other people's genes may lead to a compromised immune system, as in the case of me, poor eyesight. It might lead to physical weaknesses and so on. So people vary in their genetic quality. Now, if we go through this mixing process, which is sex, if we just mix indiscriminately, let's just say I've got decent genes, not fantastic and not terrible. I want to make sure, again, this is not conscious, my genes have made me discriminate. Well, let's imagine I don't discriminate. I just mate with somebody, whoever, the first person to come along, you'll do, okay? So let's just so happens that person has absolutely terrible genes. If I mix my genes with that person's genes, then my offspring will be less likely to survive than if I was lucky enough to mix my genes with somebody with absolutely fantastic genes, okay? Now, of course, that person with fantastic genes, although I will be benefiting from them by mixing my genes with their fantastic genes, they actually would not be benefiting from mixing their genes with my lower quality genes. They would want somebody to mix their genes with somebody with genes at least as good quality as theirs. So, if there was no discrimination, it would mean that sometimes my children would be terribly sick, and occasionally they would be okay. So now we imagine that some kind of set of mutations happens, which leads to me being able to determine how good a potential partner's genes are. Now, we can't actually do that by examining the genes. We can possibly do it now by modern gene sequencing techniques, but in ancestral times it was not possible. So how might discrimination have arisen? I will continue that on the next